By the 1980s, Japanese imports had revolutionized the car industry, capitalizing on oil shortages and the need for affordable small cars that were actually, reliable. Honda and Toyota in particular showed Americans that it was in fact possible to make affordable four-cylinder cars that would last.
A Toyota is a good feeling.
But while Civics and Corollas, Accords and Camrys began to dominate the middle-class market, members of the more affluent class were gravitating towards European imports, like Mercedes and BMW, and the general consensus was, you either picked reliability and practicality, or you picked luxury and status. You couldn't have both. But what if you could? That was the question that Toyota set out to answer when development of their first luxury flagship targeted at the American market started, all the way back in 1983. Codenamed F1, this new product was developed over 7 years by 60 designers, 1,400 engineers, thousands of technicians, and resulted in hundreds of prototypes. Costing Toyota over $1 billion to develop, this was not just going to be any other car. No, this would be the first Lexus. This would be the relentless pursuit of perfection. Now, Toyota already did have a flagship luxury vehicle in their home market, the Toyota Century. But the Century wasn't right for the American market. They also had the Toyota Mark II, which was sold as the Cressida. I really like Cressidas, they're really nice cars in their own right. And I have to imagine it would have been tempting, especially from the perspective of Toyota bean counters, to just add a few extra luxury gimmicks to the Cressida, maybe drop in a bigger engine, slap a Lexus badge on it, and call it a day. I can think of some other manufacturers who would have done that. But no, Toyota wasn't playing the old rebadge game with this one. The Lexus flagship was to be built from the ground up, on an all-new platform with an all-new engine. The LS was to have a top speed of 155 miles per hour, faster than a Supra, yet deliver a fuel economy rating of 22 miles per gallon. The drag coefficient was not to exceed 0.29 at highway speeds, which is less than a Prelude, by the way. The noise level in the cabin was not to exceed 68 decibels. If achieved, these figures would make the resulting car faster, quieter, more aerodynamic, and more fuel efficient than any of its German rivals. This would be unlike anything Toyota had ever built before. Since the Lexus brand was being introduced to specifically cater to the American market, Toyota conducted extensive market research during development to determine just what luxury meant to American customers. They learned that the top priority for potential American buyers was a prestigious image. Performance was only considered to be the fourth most important quality at the time, which is something I've touched on before in previous videos when covering some Acura models of this era. Nowadays, many buyers want kind of a sports luxury car all in one. People even want sporty SUVs now, which is kind of weird. But in the 80s and 90s, performance and luxury cars were very separate markets. But how do you build a prestigious image with a brand new brand? A prestigious image has to be earned. Usually. This meant, to a certain extent, if the Lexus was to exceed or even match the prestigious image of its European competition, it would have to look the part. This meant conforming to the expected three-box design for a luxury sedan, all while pushing the boundaries for such a design when it came to aerodynamics, fuel efficiency, and handling. And I think they achieved this goal. After debuting in January 1989 at the North American International Auto Show, the first LS400s began arriving at American ports in August 1989, with sales officially beginning in September. The finished product definitely looks the part of a prestigious luxury sedan. I mean, what's not to like about this exterior? The two-tone color schemes, something I wish luxury cars still did, the almost BMW-like taillights, and a front end with a prominent grille that is sure to let all your neighbors know you ain't driving no Camry. Perhaps the only thing they could have done to make the front end even more premium was to have vertical grille lines. Simple, clean, and smart were the keywords used during the LS400's development, and this is reflected in the interior design. The seats are made of thick leather, and the subtle wood grain trim was there to accentuate the dash and add a premium look and feel without going too far as to make the interior look like your grandpa's Cadillac. The gauge cluster was a simple, somewhat standard design with an analog tax, speedo, fuel and temp gauges. The analog gauges, however, did have a somewhat digital feel to them since they are all but invisible when the car is off, brought to life when powered on by electroluminescent lighting. This makes the gauges look very crisp and bright, but as these cars have aged, they do have a tendency to burn out, and when they do, it's lights out. You can't really even see them in the daytime. And replacing the backlighting isn't as simple as twisting in new wedge bulbs like you would in an Acura or most other vehicles of this era. The gauges are backlit by cathode tubes, and changing them requires pretty significant disassembly of the gauge cluster. Nowadays, many owners are converting them to LED by soldering in LED light strips in place of the fluorescent tubes. As expected, the interior is packed with premium features including an automatic tilt and telescoping steering wheel, heated seats, power adjustable shoulder belts, and memory seats which also recalled the steering wheel, side view mirror, and shoulder belt positions, because this was to be a prestigious luxury car, and having to set such things manually is for common peasants. A trunk-mounted dash-controlled CD changer was available with the optional premium sound system package, as was an integrated cellular telephone. By now we've established that the Lexus LS checked all the boxes to meet the requirements of a prestigious luxury car for the North American market, except for one, and this one is the most important: the powertrain. This would make or break the Lexus. And Lexus actually had a bit of a unique opportunity here, because even though Honda had beat Toyota to the punch by launching their premium brand Acura first in 1986, their stubborn refusal to make a V8 engine left the door open for Toyota to be the first Japanese brand to show North Americans that they weren't only about economical little sewing machine engines, they could make smooth, powerful, and reliable V8 engines too. It took 973 prototypes to get it right, but eventually Toyota engineers created the 1UZ-FE, a 32-valve 4-cam V8 designed to be strong, smooth, and powerful. The 1UZ was paired exclusively with a 4-speed automatic transmission. Now, of course, you guys know me, I wish it was a manual, but I do understand why it's not. Like I've said before, in the 80s and 90s, luxury car buyers were looking primarily for luxury. Remember, according to Toyota's own market research, performance was ranked number 4. Most luxury car drivers wanted a smooth and efficient transmission. They had little interest in a manual. Most of them didn't even want to park their own cars, let alone shift their own gears. And this transmission was smooth. Just take a look at this Lexus ad from 1990.
This Lexus LS400 is about to shift from first to second to third, and to fourth.
Dang, that's smooth with 3 O's. Power was sent, as expected, to the rear wheels, in a move which further differentiated the Lexus from its Acura counterpart and was much more in line with the expectations of American luxury car buyers. With the drive wheels in the right place and the proper number of cylinders, every time that weird guy down the street pulls up to your house and starts bragging about his latest Acura, you can simply remind that peasant to drive his 6-cylinder to the nearest thrift store parking lot where it belongs. The Lexus LS400 had a base price of $35,000, which equates to about $86,000 today. It wasn't cheap, but it was still priced well below its German competitors. Lexus's relentless pursuit of perfection was also applied to their customer service. In December 1989, just a few months after the LS400 went on sale in America, the company issued a voluntary recall to address a small number of complaints they had received. Lexus really went above and beyond in carrying out this recall though. All customer cars were not only washed, but filled with gas, and customers who lived more than 200 miles away from a dealership had a technician sent to their home to complete the necessary repairs. Can you imagine a dealership of any brand doing this today? Nowadays, just about every new model has multiple recalls. And that's just what's been announced in the last 30 days or so. The mid-model refresh came for the 93 model year and included a number of changes, many in response to customer and dealer requests. The LS got larger brakes, wheels, and tires, and adjustments were made to the suspension and power steering, as one of the few criticisms the LS400 had received when it came to the driving experience was a slow power steering response. Stylistic changes included a slightly revised front grille. Let me know if you spot the difference, it's very subtle. And on the inside, the analog odometer was moved off of the bezel and became digital digital and part of the gauge cluster. A digital outside temperature readout was added as well. A passenger side airbag became standard equipment. By 1994, the demand for the LS had increased so much that Lexus was able to raise the US base price to $50,000. The LS truly was a watershed car, setting the new standard for luxury cars targeted at the American market. No longer would buyers have to choose between reliability and status. They could have both, after all. The LS was built like an S-Class, priced like an E-Class, and as reliable as a Camry. How does one improve on perfection? With the first generation LS being so successful, changing things too much might be off-putting to customers who loved the first generation. But change things too little and the LS risks falling behind in the ever-evolving auto industry and allowing its competitors to catch up. Lexus certainly couldn't let its flagship be outdone by a front-wheel drive 6-cylinder, so Lexus engineers took the change only what we can improve approach, which in their relentless pursuit of perfection ended up being about 90% of the car. But everything was updated in such subtle ways that the new LS really doesn't look that different from the first generation. It's a very natural evolution. These cool edits from Lexus's 1995 dealer promotional video really demonstrate this. Just enough of a change to modernize it a little, while maintaining its classic and signature look. I think it looks great. I already liked the look of the first gen, and I think this is even a little bit better. Despite the LS400's somewhat boxy look, the low drag coefficient was not only maintained but actually reduced over last year. On the inside, it again doesn't appear radically different at first glance. The gauges are the same layout and use the same vacuum fluorescent backlighting. The center console layout is similar but simplified. The outside temperature display and digital clock are now displayed in a thin panel above the climate vents. The radio controls remain tactile, with each knob controlling a single parameter. None of these pull and twist to change this, push and twist to change that, pull at a 45-degree angle while holding down another button and touching your nose to change yet a third setting. Those kinds of switches are annoying and prone to breaking. There's none of that on the LS. The optional CD changer was now mounted in the dash rather than the trunk. The automatic climate control was now dual zone, pretty standard today but pretty high end for 1995. But if that fails to impress you, the LS climate control system also had a solar sensor now that would automatically adjust each climate control zone individually to compensate for changing sun or shade on each side of the cabin. You may recall that I've mentioned a system like this before in a previous video because there were some Acura models that had this as well. But not till about a decade later. The interior was also more spacious. A longer wheelbase allowed 3 inches more legroom for rear passengers. Overall length was unchanged though, so the trade-off for this was slightly less trunk space. Each passenger not only got their own cup holder and climate vent, including rear floor vents, but also their own map light and cigarette lighter. Or perhaps I should say cigar lighter. This is a luxury car after all. I guess nowadays these are vape chargers. The second generation LS even still had this climate vent for the driver, which everyone misses. The updated 1UZ-FE now had lighter connecting rods and pistons, a revised fuel injection system, new stainless steel exhaust, and an increased compression ratio which bumped power output up to 260 horses and 270 pound-feet of torque. They also covered up that beautiful intake with an ugly plastic cover. The revamped LS400 was about 200 pounds lighter, helping not only to improve its 0 to 60 time, but also its fuel economy. In 1997, a limited production Coach edition was available, in partnership with American leather manufacturer Coach Incorporated. Coach editions had upgraded leather upholstery from Coach, Coach emblems on the trunk lid, center console, and floor mats, special color options, unique 5-spoke wheels, and a Coach bag. The mid-model run update was introduced for the 1998 model year. On the outside, the rear end was untouched, but the front fascia was redesigned and had a much more early 2000s-esque look to it. It definitely would have made the car look much more modern at the time, and it gives it a pretty significantly updated look. Minor revisions to the interior included the addition of a primitive LCD display that could display messages, including the estimated fuel range and if a door was ajar. It was probably pretty cool in 1998, but I prefer the simple Acura door ajar lights on the little car diagram rather than text displayed on a screen, which looks like it would be better suited on the front of a VCR from 1990. The digital clock and temperature display was moved down below the center climate vents and changed from a crisp display that matched the gauges to a 90s digital watch display that matches the radio. It doesn't look as good. Are you starting to cost cut on me, Lexus? There was no more power retractable rear antenna, as that was now integrated into the rear glass. There was also now an optional CD-ROM based navigation. I would argue that you don't want that system though, because if you get it, many of the audio controls and even some of the climate controls now have to be adjusted through the touchscreen, rather than with physical knobs and buttons, as the new screen takes up the space where all the tactile controls used to be. This is always worse. Let me repeat that. This is always worse. Just give us tactile controls, auto manufacturers!
That's all you have to do!
The engine was updated again and received Toyota's new variable valve timing system, increasing power output to 290 horsepower and 300 pound-feet of torque. The automatic transmission went from a 4-speed to a 5-speed, and Toyota's VSC traction control system was added. They added even more plastic covering to the engine though, which I don't care for. Let that glorious 1UZ V8 be seen front and center when you pop the hood. No one wants to stare at plastic, although I guess the demographic these cars were marketed to probably were unlikely to ever pop their own hoods. And naked valve covers aren't allowed in Cimarron Hills anyway. Close your hood, Jeff, that's obscene. I used this same joke in my SC video. What a content recycling hack! For the final 2000 model year, Lexus added their electronic brake assist system, a system that was designed to determine if the driver was attempting an emergency stop, and if so, and the driver hadn't pressed firmly enough on the pedal to engage the ABS system, the brake assist system would increase braking system pressure until the brake pedal was released. I'm not quite sure how the system determines if the driver is attempting an emergency stop or not. I'm guessing it's just very sudden firm pressure on the brake pedal, but I don't have any experience with this system and I couldn't find much information about it. So my Toyota people, please let me know how this system works in the comments. Sales numbers remained fairly strong for the second generation LS, although they did dip slightly after 98. I think a pre-refresh second generation LS400 is my favorite LS. I like all the subtle improvements and styling differences that came out in 1995, plus you got a little extra power and a little less weight. I say pre-refresh because, well, I do really like the 1998 front end update. I don't like the interior changes they made. The text display in the gauge cluster looks tacky and dated, and I prefer the original radio climate control configuration with the better quality clock and temperature displays above the vents. But I'm being a little nitpicky, let's be real. The first two generations of the LS are a masterpiece. You really can't go wrong with any model year of the LS400. But we're about to get to the 2000s now and talk about the LS430. Here's hoping the LS430 isn't designed by the same person as the SC430. Okay, good, it wasn't. There might be hope then. The third generation LS was now the LS430, as the engine, which was now the 3UZ FE, had been bumped up to a 4.3 liter. As we know, luxury brands like to name their cars after letters and then slap the displacement of the engine either before or after that. You've got the 3.5 RL, the 3.2 TL, 3.2 CL, LS430, ES300, IS300, GS300, Q45, G35, G37, S-Class, E-Class, Elemental P-Class.
U-R-S-T-U-V-W-X-Y-Z!
The new 4.3 liter V8 had the same horsepower rating, but torque was up by 20 foot-pounds. Taking a look at the exterior styling, the taillights no longer look like BMW taillights, now they're Mercedes taillights. Actually, this whole car kinda looks like an S-Class, except they didn't really get the front end right.
What the hell is that?
It's almost as bad as Datsun's attempt at copying the S-Class. Based purely on looks for the early 2000s model years, I'd have to give my vote to the RL. Hear that? I'm better looking than both of you! Pipe down, Datsun, at least my brand's not on the verge of bankruptcy. This new design, though, was once again more aerodynamic, with a drag coefficient now of just 0.26, and the wheelbase was again stretched by 3 inches, allowing for more interior space and for the engine to be mounted further back for better weight balance. A repositioned fuel tank allowed for trunk space to be increased by 1/3. The double wishbone suspension was tuned to be a little bit firmer for more responsive handling. However, if you want to feel like you're really riding on a cloud, adjustable air ride suspension was available as part of the Ultra Premium package. Ultra Premium is a trim? Were these trims named by a 10-year-old? Well, I guess it's no worse than the older Celsior trims, which were just A, B, and C.
D-E-F-G-H-I-J-K-L.
Oh, no, don't start that again. This package also came with some very advanced for the time driver's aid features like Lexus Link Telematics, which is similar to GM's OnStar system, laser adaptive cruise control, and sonar parking sensors. With this package, you also got ventilated seats, a power rear sunshade, massaging rear seats, rain sensing windshield wipers, and soft touch closing, auto latching doors and trunk lid. Taking a look at the interior, it's fancy. A touchscreen DVD-based navigation is now standard. It looks pretty dated by today's standards, but in 2001, it would have seemed pretty modern. And at least there's still physical controls for most of the climate and radio functions. Speaking of the climate control, this system now has oscillating center vents, but Lexus isn't going to be able to impress me with that gimmick. Mazda was doing that in the mid-80s. The gauge cluster maintains a very similar layout, still with electroluminescent backlighting. I like that they made the needles red now, like on the SC. It really makes the cluster pop. Oh, and look at the door ajar light, taking a page out of Acura's book now. I told you that would look better. The lighter interior colors, you could get this, I don't know what you would call it, gray wood grain. I actually think it looks pretty good. The mid-model refresh took effect for the 2004 model year. The updated tail lamps now had clear turn signal housings, and oops, that's a Mercedes. The tail light housings now had clear turn signal lenses, and the tail lights themselves were now LED. The front fascia was subtly updated as well. I guess it looks a little better. The new projection headlamps could now swivel, with a new feature called adaptive curve headlights. This turns the headlights slightly as you round a corner so that you keep illuminating the road in front of you instead of traffic in an oncoming lane. On the inside, they went back to white needles for the gauges. I guess red was just too obtrusive on the eyes for a luxury car. More driver's assist systems were added. On the ultra premium trims, the adaptive cruise control was now a radar system instead of laser guided, which allowed it to work in less optimal weather conditions. Ultra premium trims also got Toyota's pre-collision system, where if the radar detected that a collision was inevitable, it would preemptively tighten the seatbelts to remove slack and pre-activate the brake assist system to apply maximum stopping power when the driver slams on the brakes. I didn't say autonomous braking. It's not my fault. I was traumatized by the obscenity of Jeff's exposed valve cover. I have to say the third generation LS doesn't really do it for me personally though. I don't really like the styling. It just strikes me as a boring, generic, albeit very comfortable and very luxurious, rich person car. It's certainly not targeted at the enthusiast, but it's perfect for someone like Shannon. It also has a lot of computerized driver's aid systems, which I'm not a fan of. That said though, even with all of its fancy features, these Lexuses are still known to be very reliable. And by the early 2000s, a lot of other luxury brands had started doing a lot of cost cutting, Acura included. So I do appreciate the build quality of the LS430 for still being pretty good. The relentless pursuit of perfection wasn't over yet. For the fourth generation, the LS became the LS460. The new engine was part of the UR engine family, with the North American version being the 1UR FSE, a 4.6-liter direct injection V8 with variable valve timing on both intake and exhaust cams. Power output was increased all the way up to 380 horsepower and 367 pound-feet of torque. Transmission was now an 8-speed automatic, which was actually the first production 8-speed automatic transmission. Taking a look at the exterior styling, did this car come in any colors other than silver? Oh, well, there's black and beige. Okay, literally this car only came in silver, black, and beige. Well, there's one red color, but like 4 silvers and 3 blacks. What a boring choice of colors. I mean, I know they're marketing this car to elderly executives, but come on. Putting the limited color choices aside, the exterior is about as bland as gluten-free crackers and sure to disappear into the background of any parking lot full of generic luxury cars your valet may park it in. Oh, speaking of parking, the LS460 can park itself. Provided you stop in the right position and control the throttle with the brake pedal, it will do all the steering and inputs for you for a perfect reverse stall or parallel parking job, a feature that I'm sure I'll appreciate more when I'm elderly and can't turn my head. There are actually two versions of the LS460, the standard wheelbase and then a long wheelbase version, the LS460L, where the wheelbase is stretched from 117 to 122 inches so that you can be chauffeured around in the utmost of comfort. I don't know, at this point, just give us the Toyota Century. The interior is a fairly similar layout to last year. It has pretty much every fancy amenity you can think of. There's too many to list. There's a 19-speaker audio system with a 30GB hard drive, you had heated and cooled seats, rear seat massagers, there's even a table now. I don't know what you would put on it though. Drinks would probably slide off it, and there's already cup holders. But I don't know, it's there and it's wood grain. Now there is also a hybrid version, the LS600H, also available in standard or long wheelbases. The hybrid actually uses a larger 5-liter V8, the 2UR FSE, which is then combined with 2 electric motors. The fact that the hybrid version, first of all, is not only a V8 but a larger V8 than the standard version may seem a little silly, but they weren't trying to make a Prius here. I believe what they were actually trying to do was develop a powertrain that could replace the V12 platform in the Century. In fact, Toyota designers even said that this new platform had the performance of a V12 with the efficiency of a V8. There were even more driver's aid systems now. Everything the previous generation had, plus a new advanced pre-collision system that added extra cameras which could detect smaller objects like animals and pedestrians. If it detects an object in front of you, the system will adjust the suspension firmness, steering ratio, and torque to assist the driver in making evasive maneuvers. These cars also now have a lane departure warning system that can make automatic steering adjustments for those drivers that are unable to stay in their own lane, even on a straightaway. Maybe they just shouldn't have a license then. There's also a rear-mounted radar that detects imminent rear-end collisions and will adjust the head restraints up and forward to reduce the risk or severity of a whiplash injury. Now that's a feature I don't mind. It's not trying to drive the car for you, just reducing the injury if someone slams into the back of you, which sometimes you can't do anything about. It's not my fault. I know, Jeff's valve cover. Why isn't that thing fixed yet, Jeff? Ah, fair. The LS600HL was sort of the top of the top premium LS, and it also had a driver's attention monitor, where a camera mounted on the steering column stares into your eyes to make sure you are paying attention. That's kind of creepy actually. Look away for too long and the system will sound a warning chime, and if it deems necessary, apply the brakes. I don't like these systems at all, and I can tell you from many years experience working at dealerships that most people don't even know their car has this feature, and when it activates, it usually just scares them and causes them to panic. Now yes, maybe their salesperson should have done a better job going over all of these features with the client, but I would argue that if you can't stay awake, you probably just shouldn't drive. If you're behind the wheel, pay attention.
That's all you have to do!
In 2009, Lexus added an all-wheel drive option for the 460 and the 460L. This package would also give you the adjustable air suspension. The first of 2 refreshes occurred for the 2010 model year. The front clip, grille, and headlights were updated. It looks a little better, I guess, and the rear taillights were slightly tweaked as well. They also introduced a new sport variation, the LS460 Sport, a more performance-oriented trim available in the standard wheelbase and rear-wheel drive only. This 460 Sport came with Brembo brakes, a sport-tuned air suspension, a body kit, paddle shifters. The engine was the same 4.6 liter as the other non-hybrid LS models though, but it did use the Sport Direct Shift automatic transmission from the ISF, which shifted faster. The LS went mostly unchanged for another few years until 2013, when a pretty significant cosmetic revision updated the front end with Lexus's new corporate grille. The new look is much more aggressive and more in line with Lexus's other products, and I do think it looks much better. This version won't blend into the parking lot quite so easily when you exit the bingo hall super late at night at 6:15 p.m. and forget where you parked. The interior was also very significantly revised as well, with an almost totally new dash. The whole center section is completely different. There's a different steering wheel, different center console, different climate controls. Ooh, an analog clock. I have to say, this is a much better looking interior. This is one of the most significant interior revisions mid-model run I've ever seen. The LS460 and LS600 hybrid would continue to be sold up until the 2017 model year without any more significant changes. This generation had a 10-year run, but honestly, it's pretty forgettable. While still more reliable than most of its German competition, it's not quite the same level of perfection we saw in previous generations. The 07 to 2010 models in particular had some issues with parts of the interior interior melting in the sun, and there were several common braking system issues and failures. These issues seem to mostly be resolved after the first mid-run update, but it doesn't seem like quite the same pursuit of perfection was applied to the development of this generation. It will still balance champagne glasses though. Maybe I'm being too hard on it. It does do its job of being a high-end flagship for Lexus. It's comfortable, but won't get you many looks when cruising down the street. But if you're a rich executive, that might be just what you want. Well, we've made it to the modern era, the generation that is still in production today. Starting with the 2018 model year, the LS, now the LS500, came standard with a direct injection twin-turbo V6 mated to a 10-speed automatic transmission, and a 6-cylinder? Really, Shannon? I told you 6 was average. Who belongs in the thrift store parking lot now? To be fair, this twin-turbo V6 puts out 416 horsepower and 442 pound-feet of torque, so it's still much faster than an Earth Dreams powered RLX. Well, you didn't have to tell them that. And have some decency. Put that engine cover back on. The hybrid model outputs 354 horsepower and 257 pound-feet of torque. The styling is, well, pretty much what every Lexus looks like nowadays, but I'll be honest, it's a pretty sharp look. Lexus really did a good job with their corporate grille. So good, in fact, that Acura and Infiniti both decided to copy it. The interior is, I don't even know what to say. The back seats are basically a limo at this point. The dash is pretty sharp looking if you like modern design. There's a touch mouse pad for controlling the infotainment unit, which I don't really know how good it works. Hopefully it's better than the glitchy touchscreens we see in most modern cars. Ooh, an analog clock. A 2021 model year refresh brought a facelift that kind of smoothed out the aggressive design features. It's still a very sharp looking sedan though, you can't deny that. As part of the refresh, the LS500's average size V6 engine got an updated piston design that was supposed to help reduce emissions and reduce noise and vibration. The interior was updated with further refined seats and a 12-inch touchscreen infotainment system replacing the previous mousepad based one. There was also a number of updates for all of the many driver's assist systems. In 2025, it looks like all Canadian models are all-wheel drive now, but the US still offers both rear-wheel drive and all-wheel drive versions for both the standard LS500 and the LS500F, which is the sport model. In 2025, a brand new base model LS starts at $81,000 in the United States. So what's your favorite generation of the LS? And do you think Lexus is still pursuing perfection in 2025? Or have they gone the way of most other manufacturers and started relentlessly pursuing profit at the expense of build quality? Let me know what you think in the comments, and if you enjoyed this, consider subscribing and checking out some of my other deep dive model documentaries.